particular mandates set out by law.
But I know about all that, but did you mean it? You said it, here it is, big as Dallas. I read the op-ed.
Should not be choosing winners and losers.
Yes, ma'am. So you disagree with the editorial?
The editorial was one that I wrote, and I wrote it in the context of to any particular sector.
So you changed your mind?
I have made myself completely clear. The whole point of the op-ed payers to undo risk.
Senator Kennedy, your time's expired.
Well, no, you went 3 minutes over. Mark.
I did, and so did Senator Toomey, but we need this hearing done by 11 o'clock.
Well, can I ask one more?
No, you've already gone 2 minutes over. Senator Warner.
Principle of Fed supervision.
Okay, I hear you say this, but the problem is the huge documented weight where you have said something very, very different. Are you saying you no longer hold these views that you've stated about allocating capital as a result of your perception of this risk?
My views have been consistent, Senator, to undo risk.
Well,
so
okay, that I'm sorry, that there is no reasonable reading of these articles and speeches that can come to a conclusion other than that you want to be allocating capital away from those industries that are generating large amounts of CO2. I'm sorry, I know you're saying something different here this morning, but that's not what you've been saying in writing for several years now.
May of 2020, the world economy is melting down because government shut it down. We're trying to hold it together with baling wire, duct tape, spit, and happy thoughts. And you say, that's great, but we ought to let oil and gas companies go broke. Did you really mean that?
Well, thank you, Senator Kennedy.
You're welcome.
For that question. And the Federal Reserve has particular mandates set out by law.
But I know about all that, but did you mean it? You said it, here it is, big as Dallas. I read the op-ed. You said, save everybody but the oil and gas industry and let them go broke. Did you really mean that?
So I have been clear on my views. The whole point of the op-ed was that the Fed should not pick winners and losers.
Except for oil and gas. You said they ought to be allowed to go broke.
The Fed should not pick or favor any sector at all.
Then why did you say it?
The Fed is not in the business of choosing winners and losers.
Then why did you recommend to them that they let oil and gas go broke?
I did not recommend.
Yes, ma'am, I read the op-ed. There it is. It's. I'm not going to quote it to you, but Senator Toomey pointed out. Why did you mean it?
Senator Kennedy, I want you to understand the role of the proper role of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve should not be choosing winners and losers.
Yes, ma'am. So you disagree with the editorial?
The editorial was one that I wrote, and I wrote it in the context of the Federal Reserve's emergency lending facilities. This was quite unlike the issue of supervision.
And you said don't give the money to oil and gas. Let them go broke, because in my opinion, they're bad for the environment. Didn't you?
I want you to understand the context for that article. That article had to do with did not have to do with supervision and regulation.
Dr. Raskin, you said it. You ought to own it. Okay, you ought to own it.
Sorry?
You said it. You ought to own what you said. I'd respect you more if you did. Let me move on to this business of allocating capital. Now, look, this is America. You can believe what you want, and I mean that. But I don't agree with your mission to politicize the Federal Reserve.
I don't believe the Federal Reserve should be politicized either.
Well, then why did you say it? Why did you say in this June 2020 piece, quote, federal regulatory bodies should allocate capital?
It is not the role of the Federal Reserve in supervisory or regulatory matters in its functioning as...
Then why did you write it?
It was written in a context, Senator, that had to do with emergency lending. It did not have to do with the context of supervision and regulation.
I feel strongly about charter schools, okay? If some president or some chairman of the Federal Reserve said, let's all get together, allocate capital away, lean on all the banks so they don't fund charter schools. You support that? I mean, you support driving oil and gas industry into bankruptcy. Do you think that would be a proper role for the Federal Reserve?
No, obviously not. The Federal Reserve is not to get involved in allocating credit to any particular sector.
So you changed your mind?
I have made myself completely clear. The whole point of the op-ed was that the Fed should not pick winners and losers or expose taxpayers to undue risk.
Senator Kennedy, your time's expired.
Well, no, you went 3 minutes over.
I did, and so did Senator Toomey, but we need this hearing done by 11 o'clock.
Well, can I ask one more?
No, you've already gone 2 minutes over. Senator Warner.
Ms. Raskin, I've heard what you've said this morning. I saw your testimony. But from your repeated speeches, op-eds, podcasts, all kinds of sources, right up to very recent times, it seems very clear to me that you believe that climate change is a very, very dire, imminent threat, that it will be catastrophic. I think you've used the word existential. And that for those reasons, it is necessary and appropriate for financial regulators, including the Fed, to allocate capital away from those companies that are contributing the most to the carbon in the atmosphere. Isn't that true?
Thank you, Senator Toomey. It is inappropriate for the Fed to make credit decisions and allocations based on choosing winners and losers. Banks choose their borrowers. The Fed does not. It is inappropriate for the Fed to choose winners and losers, and to do so is not the proper institutional role of the Fed. That is, as I said, a cardinal principle of Fed supervision.
Okay, I hear you say this, but the problem is the huge documented weight where you have said something very, very different. In the Financial Times in January of 2021, you wrote an op-ed. In that you said, and I quote, "Next, the financial supervisors will need to know how to act on this information. Supervisory adjustments will have to take climate disclosures into account, and the Fed will need to use climate risk data to make decisions on asset purchases," end quote. At UC Berkeley, at a forum speech that you gave in April of 2021, you said, and I quote, "I have come to a singular recognition, and it is this. In order to maximize the speed and safety of a move into a sustainable, durable, net zero economy and away from climate change disaster, we need to use the financial regulatory apparatus to engage financial markets and financial institutions in affecting both direction and pace," end quote. In June of 2020, the Saris report came out, and you wrote, and I quote, "At the very least, we must rebuild with an economy where the values of sustainability are explicitly embedded in market valuation. This transformation will come in part from urging the leaders of our financial regulatory bodies to do all they can," which turns out to be a lot, "to bring about the adoption of practices and policies that will allocate capital and align portfolios towards sustainable investments that do not depend on carbon and fossil fuels," end quote. How is that not advocating that regulators pressure the financial institutions to allocate capital the way the regulators want?
Well, it is, of course, not the role of the Fed to be directing credit allocation. They do not choose winners and losers. The way